Hey, this is Monica Berg, author and change junkie. And if you want to build an abundant and meaningful life you're proud of, you should be listening to My Voice, Our Story with my good friend, Cielo.
Do you want to create an abundant and meaningful life you're proud of, but don't know where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the My Voice, Our Story podcast. My name is Cielo. I'm a former TV journalist turned entrepreneur in a quest to build an extraordinary life. I believe that success is a direct reflection of our daily routine and choices. So join me as I engage in unfiltered conversations with the most influential minds of our generation to learn their secrets to a thriving life. If you want tangible tips on how to cultivate habits that will transform your life spiritually, financially, and emotionally, you got to keep listening in. So let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to the My Voice, Our Story podcast. This is your host, Cielo. Hello, guys. New week, new interview. So today I have here with me, Monica. Hi, Monica.
Hi.
Monica, do you want to briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, that question, because there's a lot of different things that I do. I think what sums it all up is probably that I call myself a change junkie, which is that I'm super excited about seeking change. And I have found that when you really embrace change and look forward to change, you live a life where you feel first of all, happy, but it's a true freedom unlike any other. And so everything I do really comes from that mindset. And my work, my books, my teachings is really to help people get to a place where they aren't afraid to live the life they really crave.
Mm-hmm. Is this something that you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I finally discovered what it is I wanted to do, it was very familiar and it felt very right. So I guess the answer is yes, but was it clear at first? No. I remember as a child, I felt like I really didn't quite fit in to my family or into this world. You know, a lot of things that I saw just didn't make sense. And so I think early on, I asked very big questions like, why are we here? What really is the purpose of life? And I really wasn't satisfied by any answers until I found my spiritual study. My practice is Kabbalah, and that really helped me make sense of life. And then once I understood why I was here, then it was so clear, you know, what I meant to do, just to help people get to that place where everything that happens, every challenge, every situation is happening through you and not to you. It's to really transform and to derive purpose and meaning, especially from the most challenging places or things that have happened to us in our lives.
What is this Kabbalah? That's a really good point there.
Kabbalah is an ancient wisdom, thousands of years old, that really teaches the complexities of the physical and non-physical world. And I have found it to be an exceptionally powerful tool to reveal my potential. And in fact, it helps people reveal their potential. I think that everybody's destined for greatness. And this is a very powerful tool to be able to do that.
And you're the Chief Communications Officer for the Kabbalah Centre, right?
Correct, yes. And my husband and I are running the organizations. We have many locations all over the world.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now I want to talk about your book, Fear is Not an Option, which is a memoir and a handbook for transformation. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, I wrote 2 books so far. A third one's in the making. So Fear is Not an Option is exactly that, right? If fear is no longer an option, you tell yourself that, then you ask yourself a question, well, if that's not an option, what is now an option? And from that place, now your mind is looking for creative solutions to say, okay, if I can't do this, if I'm not going to feed that fear anymore, then what kind of thing can I create? What can I put my energy and essence into? And in my book, I identify 3 different types of fear. Mm-hmm. And the whole purpose and premise of the book is really, you know, a lot of people, therapists, different approaches is like learn to live with your fear, learn to manage your fear, learn to tolerate your fear. And my message is learn to completely eradicate fear from your life. And it is possible. It doesn't mean that you won't be frightened and things won't come up that scare you, but it does mean that you now have a plan of action to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to feed the fear. I'm actually going to look at it straight in the face and head on and see how to get past it.
And what is the action plan to eradicate that fear?
So there's 3 types of fear. I can go through it quickly if you'd like.
Yeah.
I think it really helps make it clear for your listeners. So there are healthy fears, real fears, and irrational fears. Healthy is like it sounds. It's set up for your survival and your protection. It's there to keep us safe. So for instance, if you are hiking and you go too close to an edge of a cliff, your heart starts to beat, your stomach feels funny. It's, you move back because you know that if you don't, you could fall and you'd be in danger. Same thing when your hand goes too close to an open flame, automatically you take it back in. Those are healthy fears. And intuition falls into that as well. It's that knowing, that sense that you get in your stomach when something doesn't feel right or somebody comes around you who feels a little bit dangerous. One of my favorite stories is the story of Carol Durant from Murray, Utah. And she was approached by a police officer one day when she was in a parking lot. And he said, your car's been broken into and we've apprehended the suspect. He's by the station. Will you come with me so you can identify the items to make sure they're yours? And she got that feeling in her stomach, didn't feel quite right. She asked to see his identification, which he did show. And so she reluctantly went against her feeling and decided to go in the car with him. They're driving down the highway and she has her right hand, she's in the passenger seat, on the door, actually, because she didn't feel safe. And she notices that they're driving in the opposite direction from the station. So she says that to the officer, look, you're going the wrong way. And he starts to try to handcuff her. With one hand is driving, with his other hand, he's trying to get her. So she's able to jump out of the moving car. He pulls over, a fight ensues on the side of the road, and she's able to escape. Now, 3 days later, she's reading in the newspaper, 2 days later, and she sees that on that day that she was apprehended or attacked, a few hours later, somebody else, another woman was. And actually, she was raped and murdered. And she looked and they found the guy who did it. And she looks at his picture and she realized it was the same man that approached her wearing the police outfit. And it was serial killer Ted Bundy. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. So I think that, again, healthy fear, as long as you understand it, right? Completely fine. And it doesn't stop us from living. It doesn't really make us paralyzed. I'm okay with that one. Then you have real fear, and that's like it sounds as well. So it's rooted in reality. It's fear of losing our loved ones. It's fear of disease. It's fear of getting old or sick. So with this fear also, it can be utilized to really help us be stronger, and we can derive purpose and meaning from these fears. So for instance, let's say somebody's afraid of losing their parents. I mean, we always have that fear, whether we're 5 or 50, nobody, we all get to that place that, we don't want to lose the ones that we love the most.
Yeah.
But even with this fear, you can use it to actually help you to make sure that the time you spend with your family is quality, that you're fully present when you're with them, that you tell them how much you love them, you're clear about your expressions and your feelings, so there's no regret. Instead of ruminating on something that will eventually happen, just be fully present. So, and even with aging or disease, right? I think that if people really have that fear, then make better life choices, right? Make sure your mind is healthy, you use your body, you eat healthy, you don't have too much sugar or alcohol, whatever the case may be. So again, with this fear, it can be a great motivator for change. It's the last fear that we need to eradicate, and that's the fear of spiders, of death, not death, spiders, elevators, heights, fear of public speaking, fear of rejection. So these illogical fears, right, they feel very, very real, and they will stop us from living our best life. So if somebody is afraid of public speaking, but they are very passionate about something and they have something to say, but the fear is greater, and they feed the fear, I always say to people, which one is actually greater for you? The fear, which eventually will go away. If you get up enough times and you really believe in what you were saying and you really believe in helping people or whatever your message is, then which one's really more important to you? And when you place it like that, and I give a bunch of tools in my book as well, then you realize that actually you are in control and you can direct your thoughts and you can navigate your life, and fear does not have a place in that.
Yeah, I love the way you break down the different types of fears. You were talking about tools. I'm sure there's like so many different tools, but what are the main tools that you'd say that will help someone eradicate that specific type of fear?
Well, there's so many. I think the ones that come to mind immediately are taken in small steps. I think very often people are like, oh, if I'm going to overcome this fear, it's got to be big and I've got to do it right away. And I've got to tackle it in the most extreme way. No, take baby steps. So for instance, if you're afraid to drive on the freeway, some people have that fear. Don't go during rush hour, and don't say I have to drive for an hour. Actually, go first thing in the morning when your willpower is the strongest, actually, because you haven't been using it all day, and go from one exit to the next exit, and then build upon that each day. Maybe you add another minute or another exit or whatever the case may be. So really bite-sized, small ways of approaching it. Also, which is basically exposure. The other thing we do often, we tell ourselves stories. We tend to catastrophize things, like the worst thing I ever read about what happens on a plane is going to happen, and that feeds into the fear of a plane crashing, et cetera. You can talk yourself into or out of any situation pretty much, right? So it's really just, and I think the most important thing is don't give it energy. Like for me, if I ever start to notice something that's creeping up and it starts to feel like something that's stopping me and it's in the fear category, I will make sure that I go out and I do everything in that one area to push it so no fear is actually being created. So I'm able to stop it before it grows into something bigger. So for example, years and years ago, my second child was born with Down syndrome. I found out after he was born. I got pregnant 3 months later with my third child. And I was just, I was a very different person. I always say before Josh and after Josh. So for the point of this story, before I was an adrenaline junkie. And again, I am now today. But there was a period of time that I just mentioned from the birth of the two that my adrenal glands were shot and I just could not take any shock, right? And I didn't realize this, but I had this great idea that we'd have like a fun day. This is when they were a little bit older, a few years older, to go to an amusement park because I used to love that, right? I liked the thrill. I liked all of it. What I didn't realize, and I only realized it as we're inching up on the first roller coaster, is that what I used to love now completely terrified me. So we're going up and my palms are sweating, my heart's beating. I feel like I'm about to die. And there's this bear on the side. It's a roller coaster in Magic Mountain. And he's waving. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is synonymous for the last happy thing I'm ever going to see in my life. And we're going really slowly, right? Just before the first drop. And I had this thought of like, I can just jump off the roller coaster and stand next to this bear. And then I don't have to go on the roller coaster. But then I caught the thought, right? And the thought scared me more than the roller coaster. I was like, I'll never live this down. I'm going to make the evening news. I mean, it's crazy. So I stayed obviously on the roller coaster. But what I did the rest of that day is I went on every single roller coaster in the park. And it wasn't that I suddenly enjoyed it. I didn't. If you saw the before and after pictures, they take your picture when you walk into an amusement park. So I had like braids and I have like lipstick on and pink in my cheeks. And then when we exited, we took our own pictures. I was green. My hair was like frayed. I was beside myself. But you know what? I did not develop a fear of roller coasters. And now I still enjoy it, right? So I think it's important to really put fear where it belongs, which is in the way back seat. Because if not, it can really stop you from living the life that you want.
So in your experience, how do you let go of control?
It's something that most people really struggle with. It's that need for certainty, right? Of knowing how things are going to turn out. And we get so invested in that. And for me, and by the way, I am a type A personality. And so I understand that kind of characteristic. But I think it starts with the consciousness that we really are never in control. It's a false sense of control, right? And so what happens is we go through life really trying to hold on to that and trying to create situations where we know the outcomes, which is really kind of boring and false because you never really are going to know. And that's why in the start of our talk today, I talked about being a change junkie. When I changed my mindset to be the person that actually not just understands it intellectually, but really lives in the way that, you know what? I woke up this morning. I think my day is going to go a certain way. I have plans. Of course, I have goals. I have big ideas, and I'm going to make steps and strides towards those things. But I'm also equally flexible and aware that if something doesn't turn out the way I wanted, well, great. Maybe there's an opportunity for something else here. So I never get upset about those things. I really have now trained myself to be in this place of, okay, this didn't happen, or this did happen and I didn't want it, or it's not what I planned, or whatever the case may be. And I stop and say, okay, so what can I do now about it, right? I can't change an outcome. I can't control any situation. And by the way, I think it's a fool's life really to kind of approach life in that way because you're going to be running after things that will never really happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's a constant struggle for everyone because we all have these days where we're gloomy, we're not productive, we're sad, we're just depressed. I think the challenge is to wire our brain in a way to not let those negative emotions take control of our mind and soul.
Yes, and actually what I started to do years ago, and I still practice, I don't even write the days off. That's what people do, right? The day isn't how I wanted it to be, and I have no control, and I hate this day. I can't wait till tomorrow. They wait till happy hour to like drink it away. I say you can restart your day anytime and as many times as you want, right? So let's say, for instance, you wake up in the morning on the wrong side of the bed, you missed your alarm clock, then you go to the kitchen, you realize you're out of coffee, the kids are late to school, you're like, then you yell at them, right? And you feel by the time now it's afternoon, you just really want to crawl back in bed. You didn't like anything about the morning. Now, sure, you can do that, but I don't believe in wasting days. So instead you could say, okay, I don't love what I did before. I'm not proud of my exchanges. And I feel that pain. And that pain actually is kind of necessary because it motivates us to change also. But then in that moment, say, okay, I'm going to restart my day in this moment. Because each day is a gift and you're not going to get that day again. Each day has its own unique energy and its own unique opportunity. And the only way that you're going to be able to find it is if you're able to practice this. So yeah, is it hard? It is at first, but like anything, the more you practice it, the easier it is to become. But more than anything, I think it's much harder to live the other way, where you're at the whims of the universe. Sometimes it's chaotic, sometimes it's not. You have highs, you have lows. You know, I don't like living like that. So for me, this is a much easier approach.
Is there any specific tool like yoga and meditation that has really helped you with that?
The biggest thing that has helped me is to keep feeding my mind, keep learning, expanding my consciousness, and really connecting to something greater than myself, which is my source. So when you really come to a place where you have learned to love yourself fully and completely, and you've challenged those negative false belief systems that say, oh yeah, you're deserving of bad things, or that bad thing happened because of what you did before. When you change and you get rid of all that noise, which is the work that you need to do, then something else replaces it, which is a knowing that everything that happens to you is for your greatest good. And your job is just to find out what that is. It's to have certainty in knowing that you're loved enough, that your being is whole and complete. But what we do often is we put shells on that from the way we speak to people or how we behave or when we're not kind to others. And then we get into what feels like a dark place. And in fact, it is. So the job is to peel back those layers. And how do we do that? Again, by making sure that we act in a way that is incongruent with who we are meant to ultimately become. It's like the ideal version of ourselves, not perfect, but the perfected self, right? Meaning, you know, it's you on your best day in terms of how you speak to people or how you speak to yourself. It's being in that space. And when you really can get there, then, meditation, yoga, all of those things are add-ons, but it really starts with a shift in the mind.
Yeah. The mind is so powerful.
For good and bad, yeah. So that's the thing. I mean, you need to be able to direct your thoughts. And the thing about a thought is that it can be changed. I think often people really accept everything they think or believe as truth. You know, I really, when I start working with people, the first thing you need to do is to be in touch with your belief systems. Are they really yours? Or are they beliefs that were impressed upon you by your third grade teacher or your friends in high school or your parents who had those belief systems? And do they really work for you? Are they supportive? Are they kind? Are they nurturing? I mean, that is the very first place to start, because at the end of the day, you live in your body, you live with your mind, and it's your experience. So you need to make sure your experience of yourself is the best that it can be.
Yeah. So you actually mentioned that you were a change junkie. How did you come out with that term?
Because I, like most of the world, really avoided change. You know, we work very hard at accumulating things in our lives. You know, from when we're a child, we get older, we believe that, you know, if you get the best grades and you go to the best school so that you can make a lot of money and hopefully find a profession you like and get a beautiful home and, you know, all these things. And so then when we arrive at that, right, usually in our 30s or 40s, then we're so afraid to lose any of it, because then what? What I'm asking people to do is to realize you never arrive anywhere. And while physical things are great and they're important, there's another thing that needs to keep happening, which is the evolution of your being. And unless you really each day, right, think about, okay, what is something that I can change? What am I so comfortable with that might not even be good for me, or that I'm so afraid to lose. Well, that's an indication of something maybe you would want to work on. And if you weren't so controlled by that, what would you be doing differently?
Yeah. I mean, changes, I think, grow. That's really it. You don't grow if you don't change, if you don't take chances and opportunities. What would you say are the main ingredients to maximize your potential?
Well, I think it goes back to, again, really looking at who you are and being able to be honest with yourself about that. Very often people aren't truthful with themselves because they're not willing to do anything about it, or they're afraid to actually make that first step, a big change or even a small change, right? Because, the saying is the better the devil you know than the one you don't, right? It's, again, that fear of the unknown. So what I say to people is, you have nothing to lose. If you continue the way you are, you know how your life is pretty much going to be for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
This way, at least, slowly try to find ways to discover more. There's so much out there. Be curious. Don't be afraid to really first be honest with yourself. I think that the biggest disservice we do is that we often lie to ourselves about why we stay in situations or why we stay with partners we do. So I think if we're actually able just to say, okay, this isn't great, but I'm not going to do anything about it yet. Fine. Just at least have the conversation with yourself. And from that space of honesty, then you can give yourself permission. Still, the next would be, I'm not going to do anything with it. But if I were, then what would be the next step? It's just like become a friend to yourself where you really nurture your desires. There's something that I often talk about in my other book, Rethink Love, which is the shame of wanting. So many people have so much shame in expressing what they desire or what they want, mostly because we got negative feedback when we did early on in life. And so we bottle all of that inside and we actually live our lives for other people, doing what they want us to do or what will make them happy. And it's a recipe for disaster. You will never be happy that way.
But in a society that is constantly reinforcing that we need to seek validation from social media, friends, family, to higher insecurities, to be liked, how do we work on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that, and this is what I started to do when I was that age, I really drowned out the noise of everybody else. And it takes a lot of practice because even, I think when you're younger, we say, oh, I don't care what anybody thinks, or I'm going to do whatever I want. But we're deeply insecure usually at that age. We're still finding ourselves. And in fact, that is a lifelong process, whether people admit it later in life or not. I think that the knowing has to be that if you don't make this a priority, which most people don't, the development of their being, they don't make that a priority. We're too busy creating other things. But I think it has to be something that you really understand that unless you decide that you're no longer going to give energy to the opinions of others, even the good ones, by the way, because if you're waiting to be validated by people, that's the same thing. It's like you need them to tell you that you are okay by what they think. And it's just like, it's going to lead you to make the wrong choices. So I think just practically, and I know that this sounds simplistic, it's so hard to do, but it's still doable. You really have to say, okay, I know that if I were to look fast forward 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I am going to get to that place where I realize that person I cared so much about their opinion or this other thing didn't really matter. What's going to matter is how I think about how I'm living my life. There's this great book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, the top 5 regrets of the dying. And it was a blog at first, and she ended up writing a book about it. But she was a nurse for hospice patients. Yeah. And she found, because they would tell her, that at the end of their lives, and she was with them a lot. And she found that there were 5 that everybody had that were the same. And some of them were, I wished that I had lived my life for myself instead of what other people had wanted me to do. I wish that I had spent more time with my family than at work. I wish that I had kept my friends and not thought that, that wasn't really important. It's really very much what we're talking about here, right? It's about substance. It's about truth. It's about really what matters, which is kindness and growth and removal of all that other stuff that's attached to the ego, which is very much, people pleasing, caring what they think, looking for validation. And there's no quick fix here. It has to be a decision that each person makes. And then once they make the decision, then each day when something comes up and the reaction is, okay, I'm going to do this because that's what they expect me to do, or I'm going to do this because it's going to make them happy. as soon as you hear them, you have to stop and say, okay, what is it that I want to do in this moment? And by the way, if you don't know, that's an even greater indication that there's more work to do even before this step of getting to know yourself, being able to drown out and lower the volume of other people's voices and really make your own internal dialogue much louder. Because when we repress it and we stop actually honoring what we feel or what we desire, we can't even access it anymore.
Everything you're saying makes complete sense, but I feel half of the battle is becoming aware that you're trapped into the system. So how do you become self-aware?
Well, I love that question. I think we touched on some of the themes like being able to be truthful with yourself. But I think that it really starts with and comes down to, if you're not going to do this, no one else is ever going to do it for you. And it's going to limit the quality of all your relationships in life. When I was 17, I developed anorexia. And I'm so grateful, actually. I mean, anybody who reads anything or hears me speak, I derive purpose and meaning from the most challenging things that have happened to me. But if that hadn't become so immediate, right, I was in a life-threatening situation by my own hands, then I probably would have said, okay, this is not really a priority. I'm uncomfortable, but I would have assigned my pain to something else, right? The fact that I was starving myself to death made it really clear where the issue was, right? I really didn't like myself. I didn't love myself. I didn't honor myself. Like all the things I'm saying to your listeners today, I did not do. So it became really obvious that it was on me. The onus was on me to make my life better, to make myself happier, to make myself less lonely. I think what happens and why we get stuck is that very often people, when they are uncomfortable or they are upset or they're not getting what they want, they assign their misery to somebody else that is external to them. That's the first mistake, right? And by the way, if you look at life that way, you will find many, many people to blame, right? It'll be your neighbor, it'll be your mother, your mother-in-law, it'll be your sister, your brother, whatever it is, your boss, your coworker, right? The list is endless. So I think the first thing has to be that you are not going to live life like that. And the second thing is I fundamentally never believed and still don't in suffering. I just don't. So when things happen where I am in pain, because I don't believe in suffering, then I'm like, okay, well, what is this about? So I think you have to know what you believe. And that requires a lot of emotional intelligence. And this is something that all of these things are completely possible for everyone. And it should be. Like, this is what should be taught in school. I'm working on some children's books with my youngest. I have 4 kids. The youngest is 8. And it's teaching these concepts, about authenticity and at a very young age, because I just wish that there was that voice in my head growing up.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I'm about to hit 30 now, and I think it was probably 4 years ago when I realized, no, I don't have to do what my parents told me that I have to do, that you get, you go to school, get a job, and then get married. Like, why? Because society's telling me that I have to get married, that I have to have 2.5 kids before I'm 35. I mean, that's great if it works for you, but it doesn't have to be that way. So once you break out of that chain, right? It's like there's so much power in that, but it takes time, and everyone has a different journey.
Yes, and it's not even about the time. I think it takes a space. I think each person has to understand the importance of what we're discussing today and understand that it's a necessary step in life, and it's one that's not spoken enough. And I think, unfortunately, that's why people have midlife crises, or in their 30s or even 40s, they're like, how did I get here? Whose life am I living? I don't even enjoy these things. I don't even want these things that I've created for myself. I thought they would make me happy, but they don't. I think to admit that you're not happy and to give yourself permission to see why without blame, not even blaming yourself. Then from that space, you're going to be able to look at it and say, okay, well, this is the situation. Now, what are my options? Mm-hmm. Again, like we spoke about fear earlier.
Yeah. Love the wisdom. Yeah, that's so important. Now, I want to ask you a couple of my voice or story questions. The first one is, what is your definition of success?
I think success is waking up every day loving what you do. Mm-hmm. And because when you love what you do it well, right? So I think they're really connected in that way. And I think it's also understanding that you never arrive. And so therefore, each day, right, if you're doing what you love and you're helping people, or you feel like really great in that space, then you're successful each day, right? I just think that sometimes people are like, oh, and you cap it off somewhere, if I achieve this thing or I get to this place, then I'm successful. And I just don't see it like that.
Yeah. And I ask this question because I feel young people have an obsession with success, right? It's like, I want to be successful so badly. And then when you ask them, it's like, wait, what is success for you? They cannot even give you a straight answer.
And I think the other part is, and why is it important to you, right? Usually it's really rooted in ego, because if I'm successful, people will respect me. If I'm successful, people will love me. If I'm successful, people will listen to me. If I'm successful, I'll have a lot of money. Well, none of that is actually true, right? Not necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What piece of advice do you have for someone out there that right now is struggling, that is going through a really tough period of time, and they seem to not be able to move forward?
So I think that there are a lot of ways to get help for that, right? But you have to be willing to get help. I think very often people, I think social media is to blame for a big part of this. They look at their life or how they feel in their day, and then they look at somebody's snapshot of like what looks like every day, but it's not. It's like a window into a minute of the day, perhaps, or their week. And they're comparing themselves against unrealistic
highlights, right?
Exactly.
Of that person.
So I think the first is don't compare yourself to anybody else, and be kind to yourself. Let go of that expectation that you should be X, Y, and Z at this stage of your life. When I was younger, in my 20s, I was like, I should have written my first book already. And then I was like, wait a second. First of all, stop this, right? You're not being kind to yourself. And second of all, I came to realize that if I had actually written my first book in my 20s, it wouldn't have been that good, because I didn't have as much to say and I didn't have as much life experience. So I think it's just really, again, stop the judgment, stop the comparison, and really be kind with yourself and have a conversation with yourself. What is it in my life that I don't like right now? What isn't working for me? What doesn't make me feel good? Who doesn't make me feel good? What's the environment I'm in that's not right? And write it down, and then write down things that you can do differently to support yourself. I often talk about creating a to-be list and then a to-do list. And most people don't even know what the to-be list is. And usually the to-do list is nonsense, right? Like, go to the store, get my groceries, or, whatever. And it really doesn't matter if you actually do it week to week. But your to-be list would be, I want to be a person who is a great friend, let's say, right? So on your to-do list would be call 2 friends a week that are struggling. So your to-be list really then dictates how you spend your time. And I think for many people who are stuck, they're just in this cycle of repeat, so wake up, start, repeat. And you don't actually stop to say, or to catch the thoughts. And probably most of them are very negative towards yourself and maybe even your outlook on life. So I think it's to really catch those and challenge them.
Yeah, love that. Well, if you're listening to this, be kind to yourself, because we're not kind. It's so hard to be kind to yourself. You're so good at criticizing yourself every day, at pointing all the things that are wrong with you. But when it comes to be kind and just appreciating for who you are, it's so, so hard. And I've seen it so many times, especially in young people. If you could speak to someone, past or present, who would that person be and why?
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, I would pick 2. I'll be brief. One would be Rav Ashlag, who was the founder of the Kabbalah Centre. And a lot of what my husband and I set out to do is based on his teaching. So, to sit with this giant for an hour would be, no words. And then a more mainstream answer perhaps would be author David Foster Wallace. I just loved the way that he saw things. He's not alive anymore, but I love everything, the way his writings really resonate with me. So I think it'd be great to sit with him and talk about different things, past and present. And
yeah, I always love that question, because people are like, yes, there's so many people I want to talk about. If you could go back in time, what will you tell young Monica?
I think the kindness thing probably would be the conversation I had then. And also that you're not alone. I think that I felt at the time like I was the only one experiencing what I'm experiencing. I'm the only one that felt the way that I did, especially when I had the eating disorder. And I think that's why I publicly speak about pretty much everything that happens to me. And people are always like, wow, you're so vulnerable. And I say, well, no, it doesn't even feel vulnerable. It's like me telling you my hair is brown at this point. And I do that for two reasons. I think to show people, again, that we are all human beings having human experiences. So it's whatever's happening to me is happening to you. It might look a little different or taste a little different or whatever it is, but it's pretty much, we all have these experiences. And the other is, when I talk about things publicly like that, I hope to inspire people to have the courage and the certainty that they can derive purpose and meaning from the things that are most difficult for them.
Okay. This also ties kind of like in the next question is like, if there's one thing you want people to take away from our conversation today, what would that be?
Well, if this is your life and you alone are responsible for the quality of it. So, when you look at it that way, you really can't, it really puts you into motion, right? Mm-hmm. I really believe in identifying issues in our life and following it up with immediate action, somehow to make it better or different.
Before I let you go, where are you most active in social media? Where can our audience connect with you?
Instagram and Facebook. My handle is Monica Berg 74.
Okay.
And my husband and I have a podcast called Spiritually Hungry.
Oh, okay.
So you guys can check that out.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Tell us more about the podcast.
So we started it during COVID time, quarantine. I love podcasts, obviously. I'm on many of them. I love connecting. I always learn something different. I love that personal aspect. And I said for a really long time to my husband, because we work together and we have a fun relationship. We're good together. We're very different in a lot of ways, but very similar in others where it really matters. And so I just thought it'd be really cool to talk about different spiritual topics and bring in science and psychology. And there's a lot of relationship stuff too, because you see us bantering back and forth. And he was like, no, we don't have time. So when COVID happened, I was like, hey, you have no excuses anymore. We're doing this. So we have now almost 70 episodes out.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's really fun. It's really great.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include the link so they can check it out. By the way, where can people find your book if they're interested in purchasing it?
On Amazon or on Kabbalah.com. Mm-hmm.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for your time. It has been so enriching speaking with you today. Honestly, thank you so much for all.
Thank you. It was great being with you today.
You too. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks.
That is all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. We have an incredible lineup of guests, so you're not going to want to miss any of our episodes. Also, connect with us on Instagram and join our Facebook group at My Voice Your Story for more tips on how to live your best life. Until next time.